All right. Hello, everybody. Let's see. I think I've figured this out. I think we're doing pretty good. I'm just going to keep gabbing until I see a few of you guys logging on, getting with the program. Give me a second. I'm going to go over here and check my laptop to see what it looks like in the group while I have this live on my phone. Okay? Okay. Okay. I see Violet is here. Hey, Violet, good to see you. I've got all kinds of silly things happening with my laptop, which is the laptop to my left is where I will be monitoring the comments. And so, unfortunately, until I figure out a better system, you guys, you'll see me going from here, kind of off to the side, here off to the side. Tomorrow I should have a better system dialed in for you guys. So, to start with, hey Karen, does everybody have pens or pencils and papers, keyboards, something to write with? I hope so. If you do, thumbs up, mention it in the comments, jump in, get involved, let's get started. And yes, that will help me to know where we are. Now it's funny, I'm looking in the group and I don't see... Oh, okay. I do see. That's a weird start to the... Okay. Let me just mute that. All right. Good. So, welcome to the 5-Day Storytelling Challenge. I'm super excited. I want to thank you for being here. Kay, you're here. So good. You're glad to be here. Karen's here. Violet's here. There are a few other people that I can see, the little eyes on the screen icon, who have not acknowledged their presence yet. So I'm just going to keep going a little while longer until I see a little bit more engagement, because I know a lot of people were waiting for this first day. And get your pens and pencils ready. Get ready to start writing things down. By the end of this, if you can put the time in each day, hey James P. Hepner, the outcome should be that you have a rough example of your story, okay? I don't know if in 5 days, it just depends on how much work you can put in if you'll have the fully crafted story, because that's a lot of work. And if you do, I salute you. I'll be impressed. I will really be impressed. But regardless, you'll have enough, hi Mercy, you'll have enough information. Violet says, good morning from Australia. I love that. Whether you get your story completed or not, and really refined, you'll have enough information to go back and complete it. So take good notes, okay? Take good, great, super thorough notes. Write like crazy, write like the wind. So I teach my storytelling system with an acronym, and that acronym is the word STORY. It's S-T-O-R-Y, story, okay? I teach it with this acronym for, obviously, ease of memory, ease of accessibility, and, so it's easier for you to learn. And the first thing, this will be where you want to start taking notes. The first thing that you need to understand is the importance of a structure. Because without a structure to guide you, and more so to contain you, really, you will have just rambling collection of details, data, information, anecdotes. This is what normally happens. So you need some sort of a structure. Now, in the lead up to this event, I talked a lot about how we'd go much deeper than structure, and we will. That's a promise. Give me 1 second here. There we go. Just had to get some water. It is a promise that we will go far deeper than structure, but you must start with structure, okay? The structure that I like is what I call the Socratic arc. It's very common, it's very simple, it's very powerful. Hello, Julian. So you've got simple, common, powerful. There's a reason it's so common, right? And that's because it's so powerful. Every great movie that you've ever seen, every great book that you've ever read, any lasting story of any kind can trace its roots back to this structure. And so that's really important to understand, right? The structure allows us the freedom to tell the story that we want and need to tell. Hi, Julie. In order to get our point across, in order to convey the information we need to convey. And I'm going to assume throughout this challenge that we're primarily dealing with our core story here, okay? So that's the assumption I make. Now, this will work for fictional stories. It will work for pretty much any kind of story. But I'm going to speak by default as though we're all writing our core story, which is the same as our brand story. So core story is the same as brand story. And I will be drinking liberally from my water flask because I exert energy when I communicate, as you should, and I like to stay hydrated, as you should. So, getting to the structure. The structure happens in 3 acts. Mark cannot connect. Well, Mark, how can I see your message if you cannot connect? I guess I'm a little confused. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to be able to troubleshoot it right now while I'm in the middle of it. But Mark, if you can hear me, then message me later. I'm going to leave the video up in the group for at least 24 hours. Hi, Veronica. So even if you can't connect now, you'll be able to access the content. And then we'll try to troubleshoot as we go along. There's always some troubleshooting that seems to go with these kind of things. That having been said, let's get back to the structure for a core story. Now, you will have a plethora, a bevy. Hey, Ahmed, you will have all kinds of stories from your life, right? Some of them you won't think are important, but to other people they are. Some of them you will find very important to you. Other people will too. And some of them you will think are important and other people won't. Now, this can get a little confusing, so we need clarity here. So this is where you want to be writing down too. The first thing you have to get clear on and maybe ask yourself is, who am I professionally? Because again, we're thinking of this in context of a core story, right? What do I do? Who am I? What do I do? Who do I do it for? This is really important, really fundamental stuff, guys. Now, I chose not to use the word basic because even though it comes first, it's not basic. Okay, Mark is in. Greetings, Mark. But it's fundamental stuff we have to know, right? You may say to yourself, like some people do, like is actually very common, when asked the question, who do I serve? You probably imagine quite a broad range of people who could benefit deeply from what you do. But you can't start there, right? You got to think of like concentric circles moving outward. The very center is who you serve. Other people will be served by what you do as well, but you've got to know the core, the kernel, the bullseye. Okay? You've got to know that. Who do you serve? So the questions we need to answer, first and foremost, who am I? What do I do? Who do I serve? Which I just talked about. And how did I get here? Now, let me talk to you a little bit about the how did I get here piece. Because this is where we separate the wheat from the chaff with the stories of our lives. Okay? And when I say the stories of our lives here, I mean the many stories that together make up our lives. Because I focus on transformation through the power and the skill of communication, the art of communication. I train public speakers, but as many of you know, hi Margaret, my work is much deeper than just teaching you how to present from the stage. And as a result of that, as a result of me going really deep down into the content, I offer a skill set that allows you to potentially transform any relationship in your life and to make it positive, and so to give you power, in a sense, over the relationships in your life. I'm just going to add a little footnote here. Typically, I get asked about family. Family is kind of the one spot where we can't always necessarily save the day. You can't be a prophet in your own backyard, as the saying goes, right? So sometimes, there are always going to be some relationships that we can't, by the force of our own desire, change. But for the most part, when you learn how to communicate in the way that I teach, you can transform your relationships. So what I teach then, again, is deep communication principles, right? And they don't necessarily all kind of come from one place or match one certain belief system. They're about what works. They don't get mired in dogma. They don't get stuck in the mud. I just focus on what works. So what we're talking about here is the how did I get here question of the 4 questions, right? Who am I? Who do I serve? What do I do? Who do I serve? How did I get here? And the thing to understand why I'm digging so deep into this how did I get here piece is because I have stories in my life. I could write 5 books and never touch on the stories that are relevant to why I do what I do. Do you get it? Do you get that? Because that's huge. Thank you, Mercy. It's huge, right? I did write a book, and as I wrote it, it was a massively healing undertaking for me because I come from an incredibly difficult background, like I'm sure some of you do. And as I was writing the book, I realized I could write 5 more books and never tell the same story twice. Now, this is not me bragging. The truth of the matter is you probably could too. Even if you feel like you've had a fairly sedate sort of, a life that wouldn't impress anyone. And a lot of people I talk to feel that way. Oh, well, it's easy for you. You had such a crazy life, right? It doesn't really matter because there's always a group of people who fundamentally need to hear what you have to say. It's just a rule. So the how did I get here piece, when we're asking the question, who am I? What do I do? Who do I serve? Who do I do it for? And how did I get here? Right? What I want you to do with this is go through the most impactful stories you have of your life, within your life, and pick out between 3 and 7. Probably, let's say 5 and 7. 3 won't be enough. Pick out between 5 and 7 really crucial stories. Okay? Hey, Tim, welcome. And make sure that those stories, put together in sequence, explain how you got here, to do what you do, for who you do it for, and why you do it. I'm going to pause for just a second because I want to know if you guys have any questions on that. It's really, really important to be clear on that. So put any questions in the group, and I will look for them. I am looking now. I guess I can see the same messages on the laptop that I can see on the phone, so that's good. I won't have to break my concentration away from the phone to the laptop since all the messages. Thanks, James. Thank you. Kay Newman says, can I repeat that? Can I repeat which part, Kay? I'll pause until the message comes through. Can I repeat the part about which stories we select from our lives and why? Let's assume that that's what Kay wants to know. So, Violet's got it? Yes. Okay, so let's say you're a theta healer, a theta energy healer, right? You will not have stumbled across this arbitrarily, right? Not everybody just stumbles into theta healing. It's the kind of thing that will appeal to a very certain kind of person. Now, what your job is, before I lay out the structure for you, is to go back through your life and find the highest emotional points, the experiences that you feel could explain to others why you went through the process you went through and wound up being a theta healer. I hope that makes sense. For me, communication is at the heart of everything I do, and the power that being able to communicate with others brings. Let me explain to you what I mean by using myself as an example. So Meg asks, when you say go in sequence, does that mean they have to follow the timeline of your life? They should, yes, or that they are somehow connected. Yes, Meg, you nailed it. Because your core story needs to be at least somewhat linear, right? Now, we'll talk about the structure more in just a minute, but if you're telling me about your whole life and how it sort of, quote, led you to this moment, you're going to want to tell the stories that support that in a linear fashion. So, short answer, Meg, yes. Big, big yes on that. You nailed it. In my case, I was born in a cult and I was brainwashed from birth. This is a true story. And in that environment, one of the things that the cult members all did was they did something called subversion of language. Now, subversion of language is a very powerful tool for controlling people because our need to communicate is so central to our existence. And if you teach somebody a highly stylized way of communicating that doesn't work in the outside world, you will effectively cut that person off from being able to connect in the outside world. Therefore, and we all know how bad we need connection with other humans. We don't have to establish that again, right? That is, we're pack animals, plain and simple. We need connection and community. It is life and death for us. Let's just be clear about that. So, as a little boy, I found that I couldn't talk to other little kids because I didn't know the way they spoke. It was like being in an area, in a land where I didn't speak the language, even though I spoke English and they spoke English. So, to warp a child's perspective on how to communicate is to keep that child dependent on only those who understand the communication. So that's my first sort of impactful moment with communication, okay? Second, I then was moved to the middle of a ghetto at 8 years old. And this ghetto was all Mexicans. It was a Mexican ghetto in a very violent town. It was a super violent ghetto, super dangerous. And one of the first things I noticed there was that I was hated, I was beat up, I was picked on for the way I talked, the way I communicated. Second piece, when I learned how to speak the language of the kids in that neighborhood, it decreased significantly, not entirely, but significantly, the amount of harassment I had to deal with in school and on the streets. So that was the second time that I was really impacted by the power of language. Third, when I was 12 years old, my blood family moved to a bit safer neighborhood in the same unsafe city, and then I was exposed to kids from all kinds of different cultural backgrounds because it was more mixed. It wasn't like we were the only non-Mexican family for 3 miles in any direction, which is how it was in the ghetto part. There, I realized that one group of kids spoke one way, another spoke another way, another spoke another way, and I set out and I learned how to talk with all of them. That was the third big impactful piece of my life as it relates to what I do now. Does that make sense? So, As a little boy, as a baby, brainwashed. Communication, 1. As an 8 to 12-year-old, moved to the middle of a very dangerous ghetto, had to fight all the time, and was persecuted for the way I spoke. 2. Moved to a safer neighborhood at 12, right? 3. That's right, Violet, I haven't mentioned the next steps yet. I'm showing you guys how I select the stories from my life that relate to who I am, what I do, who I do it for, and how I got here. You get that? Are you starting to see it? I think you are. I think some of you guys just had that aha moment. So, let me break for just a second and say, are you enjoying this so far? Is this good? Is this, how are we doing? Are we off to a good start here? Because I feel like this is incredibly powerful stuff. Incredibly powerful stuff. Like, game-changingly powerful stuff. So, show me yeses. Yes, that's what I want to see. I want to see lots of emojis, lots of love from you guys who I love from afar. I want to know if it's really being impactful for you. This is the deeper level right here, you guys. This is it. Okay? This is the deeper level of how you tell your story, right? Thanks, James. Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, Kathy says that my life's purpose was molded early. No kidding. No kidding. There's a passage in my book where, hi Amita, where I was talking about being a little boy, and even before I could put words to it, I could sense that there was something terribly wrong with that group. Because everybody was walking around together, they're all talking the talk, right? The way that we spoke inside the group in that cult. And you can feel unease and discontent just rippling off people. Just rippling off people and clashing with other ripples. And it was like everybody was walking around, forcing these smiles on their faces, going through the motions of using the phrases and speaking the, talking the talk and doing the things, but nobody was really quite locked in and committed to it. It was a very strange environment to grow up in. And even as a little boy, I could sense there's something wrong here. It took me years to be able to identify what it was. It took me years to realize that communication was in fact the thing that was underneath everything I was fascinated by and interested in, right? Music is a form of communication. I studied music for years. Acting, a form of communication. I studied acting for years. As a little boy, all through my life, I always tried to create little events. I always tried to throw parties. I did concerts. All of that was a way of communicating and connecting, right? And so it took a long, long, long time for me to parse it together or parse it out. But yeah, so for me, communicating and connecting was what it was always all about. And in fact, Kevin Borges just joined, and he and I were for a long time joined at the hip. He's a drummer, I'm a bass player, and we were in a band together that was, well, I'll post pictures. In fact, I'll post pictures of me and Kevin backstage just before we're about to go on for a play that we created called Glass Slipper Blues. You can read all about it in my book. And it's so cool because I have this picture of us backstage in stage makeup, ready to go perform. But that's just the thing, right? Even getting on stage like that was a form of communication. So for me, it's all about how do we connect? How do we connect? And I think part of that is because I didn't have connection as a little boy. I need it now because I didn't have it then. And I needed it so bad that I went and learned what the science of it was, what the philosophy behind it was. So, when you're picking out your 5 to 7 main stories from your life, make sure that put in sequence they explain who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you got here. Okay, say it with me. Who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it for? And how did you get here? What stories from your life prompted you to do what you do now for who you do it for? Can you feel that? Can you feel how I wrap that all up? It feels good, doesn't it? It feels awesome. So, Man, I love that. I just love that. We understand? We'll be able to chat in the group, by the way. You'll have access to me to clarify these things as we go on, okay? I want to move on and talk about the structure itself. So the Socratic arc, storytelling arc, is pretty darn simple. It's 3 levels, it's 3 stages, it's 3 pieces. 1, 2, 3. Yes, it's 3. The first one is what's called Introduction to the Hero, right? Introduction to the Hero. Now, I'm going to take a breath here. I want you guys to be writing for this. This is what you need to know. You need to know your stories, how they explain who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you got here. Then once you get that, you need the structure, which I'm just about to give you. So, the Socratic arc has 3 stages to it. Introduction of the hero. Now, you'll notice that in all good stories, all good movies, not so much comic books because they're an ongoing timeline, but we are introduced to the main character or characters right at the beginning of the biggest challenge they'll ever face. Right? Get it? So, introduction. Stage 1 of the three-stage arc. Introduce us to you right at the beginning of the biggest challenge you will ever face. Now, I predict that some of you are saying, wait a minute, didn't you just say that my stories that say who I am, why I do what I do, who I do it for, and how I got here had to be linear and start from when I was young? You said that, didn't you? Of course you did. You caught the seeming dichotomy. Well, there's a technique in storytelling that I like to call slicing time. You do want those stories to be linear. You don't want to tell the stories in an arbitrary time sequence. But you need to start a core story, in this case, with typically, now you can play with this if you want. Typically, you want to start a core story with you in the present moment, because this is a brand story. And then once you've sort of introduced yourself as the hero, because you're the hero of this story, you then go back to the beginning. So it might, as an example, sound like, my name is Manny Wolf. I train the next generation of impact-driven entrepreneurs and change makers to tell their story and communicate with power, precision, passion, and persuasion. That's who I am, it's what I do, it's who I do it for, and then the how I got here is, whoop, back to the stories. Understand that? Sort of the elevator pitch, Veronica. Sort of the elevator pitch, yes. You could certainly use the elevator pitch there. But then you have to understand that once you intro yourself, you then go back in time, and you... So when you're thinking about it, think about writing it to answer the question, how did you come to do what you do? Right? When you write out the story of who you are, what you do, and who you do it for, write it so that it answers the question, well, how did you come to do this? Mercy says, number 1, intro of hero right at the beginning of the biggest, baddest, most entertaining, seat-gripping, hair-raising challenge. That's right. And then go back and tell the story. So let's keep it simple for now, and again, we can interact in the group and flesh out questions and specifics. What you need to know is that the first stage of the 3-stage story arc, the Socratic arc, is the introduction to you. Now, you can actually choose to do this from the beginning as well. That's okay. You can talk about your birth and move forward, but you have to play with it. It's got to sound good, right? you need to have an artistry to your writing, and that's what it comes down to. And we will cover that in the rest of the challenge. That's deeply what we're going to dive into. So the middle of the arc, the middle of the 3-stage arc, is about 90% of the story, right? It's almost everything. And that's where you tell us all the trials and tribulations, the 7 stories we just talked about picking, or the 5, or whatever it is. Could be 9, could be 3, by the way. It's just got to be high emotional content value, right? If you're a theta healer, we don't want to hear necessarily about you learning to pickle jams as a kid with your grandma on the farm. It doesn't relate. It doesn't have high emotional value, right? If, however, you were the owner of Knott's Berry Farm and you told us about right, making jams with your grandma for the state fair when you were a kid, that would be massively high emotional value. Why? Because it relates directly to, ready? Who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you got here. Yes. Okay? So, select the stories so that they support who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you got here. We're clear on that. Then tell those stories in a nice sequential arc that builds the drama. It builds the drama, right? So, let's check and see how we're doing on time. We're actually doing pretty good on time. This is pretty cool. Are you guys liking this so far? How are we doing? I'm seeing some pretty good engagement here. I'm seeing 13, 14 eyes on the camera, so that's fantastic. I assume that there are a bunch more who are watching and just not speaking out, and that's fine. But if you guys are on track so far and you're loving it, you see all those little happy faces and thumbs ups floating across the screen, float those out to me. Men and women, boys and girls, let me know that this is on point for you. Okay? Let me know that I don't have to change direction to make you understand what... Oh, Kevin, thank you, buddy. I saw that. Kevin and I have about 20 years of friendship history together. It's pretty cool. Maybe more. No, about 20. So, this is good. This is good. Let me regroup. Okay. The middle of the 3-stage arc will take up about 90% of the story, right? So you introduce us to the character, and you can either do it in the present moment, you can talk about who you are now, and then circle back to explain to us how you came to this, or you could start with once upon a time, right? You could start with when I was a little boy or when I was a little girl. And then you tell the stories that best explain who you are, how you got here. What you do, who you do it for, and how you got here. James asks how I'm doing. I am doing great, man. I am doing phenomenal. This is my sweet spot. It's my zone of genius. Thank you for asking. Seriously, I can talk about this stuff until my voice gives out. So thanks for checking in with me, James. I appreciate it. So we want to take and build. See, this is the key, and this requires craft, again, which we'll go into later on in the challenge. But you want to make sure that as you're telling the stories of your life that led you to what you're doing now, you'll be needing to share vulnerable moments, right, that were pivotal to you. You'll be needing to share emotional highs that were pivotal to you. You've got to punch it with emotion. That's what has to be there. So you take your however many stories you feel tell the main story, right, thoroughly, and you start to string them together. You start to string them together. What I did, now granted, when I wrote the book, it was more than 5 or 7, right? It was 322 pages or something. And so to stay on task with recounting my entire life, I literally took a whiteboard and I said, okay, there was the time I got arrested. And then there was, well, the other time I got arrested. And then there was the time that I got in the big fight. And then there was the time I broke into the supermarket or the liquor store. And you know what I mean? All these things. And then I put them on the whiteboard where I could see them. And I said, okay, so this has got to go here. This has got to go here. Let's move these over here. Are you getting it? So I literally put them out where I could see them, and then I organized them. Once you do that, suddenly it's so much easier. Because you can segue from story to story easier. You can pull out the themes that all of them have in common easier. So you're going to want to, for the middle part, get them on paper somewhere. If you're, yes, Julie says delivering your genius equals cellular energy highs. I could not agree more. If you're a computer person, put them on a computer sheet. For me, what worked best was a whiteboard. Okay, I had a huge whiteboard. In fact, I'll show you guys. Do you see that whiteboard back there? That's about a 3x5 or something. And dry erase wall. Yeah, that's actually what I want. So I've used that thing over and over again, right? It's just I need it to be visual myself. So whatever system works best for you, the key is get them out of your brain. And your homework, by the way, is going to be to do this today so that we're ready for tomorrow. So you're going to want to jump at some point. Start picking out the stories that explain who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how you got here, right? And then you're going to tell us how you got here. How did you come to do this? Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, the final part of the arc, the three-part arc, the Socratic arc, is just a resolution. And it's only a powerful resolution if you build up the drama in the middle of the arc. So it's very important to understand that your arc needs to be a high drama arc, right? You got to take us there. You got to let us know. By the way, let's talk about, instead of core story for a minute, let's talk about public speaking, branding, image, and perception, those things. Gone are the days where we select our experts based on degrees. So, well, not 100%, but I think you take my meaning. We live in the time now where we would prefer to learn, by and large, from somebody who is more of a guide than somebody who is an expert on high, right? In other words, I mean, I suppose you're here with me now because I'm able to be vulnerable with you and share my story with you. I don't have an advanced degree in teaching English. And frankly, I found that I studied under a lot of people who did, and they got stifled in dogma, right? And it was so funny, too. I'm going to go off on a little tangent here because we'd analyze great writers, and these English teachers who were stuck in little narrow boxes would talk about Hemingway and Joyce and all these brilliant writers, and they'd talk about how they broke all the rules. And yet they were trying to force us to follow the rules. So today we have sort of moved, Amita says because you have tried and tested techniques and learned intuitively, and both of those are true. And first I learned intuitively, and then I tried and tested them. I've got proof, right? So what I want for you from today is your stories that tell your story, how you get here, and write them all down, get them in sequence by tomorrow. That's the key. So then when you resolve it, the resolution is really easy. The resolution is just telling us that the drama worked out, right? You can write it in many, many different ways. That you are here doing what you do proves that the resolution happened. Does that make connecting and reconnecting that's very disconcerting? But it proves it, right? The fact that I'm here today proves that I wasn't killed, which I should have been many times over. Definitely where I was going. It proves that I've changed from a criminal, a drug addict, a homeless person, on and on and on, right? to somebody who is now here to serve. So I am proof of the resolution of my story. Stop for a second and let me know, you guys, do you get that? Does that make sense to you guys so far? Shoot a message, thumbs ups, happy faces, sad faces. I will take any emojis as symbols that you guys understand that. So the resolution is fairly easy, right? It is very good. Okay, awesome. It's just a contrast to the height of, okay? So here, get your stories, your 5 to 7 stories, and be able to answer the question, who are you? What do you do? Who do you do it for? And then your 5 to 7 stories explain how you got here. Does that make sense? I'll pause there and see if that makes sense. And also, by the way, are we having fun? Are we having a good time on this? Is this... Could be a twist, Amita. Yes, absolutely. I want to know if we're having a great time here. I am a strong believer in this content. I have literally seen it change lives, literally, like transform lives. I won't call anybody out, but people on this very call have had phenomenal breakthroughs just with the deeper levels of the content that I'm going through with you here today. Now, my whole curriculum also involves body language and vocal tonality. I teach those at the same kind of level I'm teaching you here, where it's very deep and principle based, and the things you can do with all 3 of those together are pretty mind blowing. They're pretty revolutionary for your life. So, you guys, that's it. That's it for today. Let's recap one more time. Answer the questions. Who are you? Like your elevator pitch. What do you do and who do you do it for? Then, with the stories from your life organized in that 3-act structure, tell me, how did you get here? Okay? Feel free to post in the group for feedback. Feel free to post your rough sketches, so to speak, of your work, your stories. Okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, good stuff, guys. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. Far too many comments to even read here, but thank you guys so much. This has been amazing for me, as I knew it would be. I'm so glad it's connecting with you guys in a deep way, in a meaningful way. And we'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Los Angeles time, right? 3 p.m. PST. Amita, you're saying how long? How long what? How long for what, Amita? Julie says, I don't know if I could write the 7 or so stories overnight. Julie, just jot them down. Just flesh them out. Just outline them. Okay? Because no, you probably wouldn't be able to write them. And I think I said it right before Julie got on the phone, the call. I think I said, you won't be able to do all the work in the 5 days. You know? But what I want you to have is enough like thumbtacks in the map that you can go back and you can do the whole story. How long should the stories be? Well, again, you know, just jot them down in enough detail that you can remember them. How does that feel? Jot them down in enough detail that you can remember them. Okay? I will see you guys tomorrow, where we will talk about the T from the STORY acronym, which is for tension and release. See what I did with my voice there? Tension and release. Because you got to have tension and release. Otherwise, you got nothing. Okay, we've talked about the act today, the structure today, who you are, what you do, who you do it for, and how did you get here. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about tension and release. You guys have rocked this. You've rocked it. Much love and respect to you guys. I'll see you tomorrow, and I'll also be interacting with you in the group, okay? All right, off we go.